Good. First time in the new year, right? Let's go.
I'm going to have to keep my phone on for a second so I can read these questions out.
Yeah, okay.
So there's a couple of questions that we were going to answer today. The first one is, I'm going to try to pronounce it, Piotr. Go on, you tell me.
Piotr? Okay, try to pronounce Przemysław.
Dude, come on.
Come on, like... That's a hard one.
Yeah, there are a lot of hard ones in Polish for sure. But he says, how much of a dog's temperament and energy level do you believe is influenced by genetics? And how much does that affect your training approach?
Okay.
Should we start there?
Go ahead.
I think a lot. It's like
was there any other question about the temperament?
Yeah, I was going to come to it later.
Ah, okay. All right.
I was going to do this one and then go to that one.
Okay.
So this is an age-old debate. This is like what people say when they're talking about nature versus nurture. And it's pretty, like, I think if you were to ask someone that is more scientifically minded, like this is almost like a very obvious answer, which is like it's a mixture of both. You know,
of course, yeah.
It's always going to be like nurture and nature. Like you can separate the two. As to like how they're weighted, I think that's more debatable.
Yeah, but also, you know, if you look at the definition of temperament, like by the definition, like temperament as innate characteristics, right? Mm-hmm. So it's suggesting by the definition that it's strongly genetically influenced, right? However, how we assess the temperament, we assess the temperament by the behavior, and the behavior itself is a pretty much mixture of genetic predispositions and influence of the environment. So even answer over here is not so straightforward. However, if we look at the percentage, it's like almost the question that is impossible to answer, because how can you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, exactly. I think as I've got more experience, though, more and more I've believed that more is genetic than I previously thought. You know, like I like ear more on the genetic side than ever before, because I see things that make me really believe that. You know, I've seen puppies that were barely socialized at all, like barely even went outside, and then 6-7 months later they're going outside and they're fully confident. And it's there are so many dogs that would not handle that. Or have puppies come into puppy class on the flip side, and they're like 10 weeks old and they're starting to resource guard. You know, the owners only had them for like days. You know.
Yeah.
So these kind of signs that I see make me believe that things are more genetic than sometimes I think people give credit for.
I think we are, as a dog trainers, we are leaning a lot into our skill set and how much we can influence with the training or with the exposure, etc., etc. Where if you will ask probably breeders, they will have like a little bit different view that the genetics are like very, very important. And I think it's also like the environment you are hanging out with. And this is why we, like for a long time, it was like, it's all how you raise them, right? And we cannot deny genetics. Like my older dog, you mentioned resource guarding. Like I took him from the breeder, and on the way, like when we were waiting for the ferry to cross the border, he had like pig ear or something. And the noise he made when, you know, my girlfriend, she wanted to take it off him, it was like horrendous, like such a resource guarding. And then, you know, he was like 15 weeks old. So there is huge genetic component. However, you know, if we think about the environment, we also have to take into account like how impactful was environment for the dog, right? Because like if the dog will experience something heavily unpleasant or even heavily pleasant, that impact will be probably bigger. Where if the dog will not experience such a things like on either side, like aversive or positive, then that environment will be less impactful, and then we will probably see like much clearer genetic design of the dog.
Yeah, I think that there is also like a genetically influenced like level of natural resilience as well. Like the ability for a dog to bounce back from stress is likely to be quite genetic too.
Oh, yeah.
So like if one puppy has a bad experience, it might not register anywhere near as bad as if a different puppy had had the same experience and, you know, is a lot more traumatized by that one event. And this is actually like, this is, oh man, there's so many ways you could go with this conversation, but like, this is something that is interesting from a training perspective, because it's like, if you're just trying to breed pet dogs, don't you want dogs that are like highly resilient? Because you want dogs that aren't going to pick up firework phobia, and you know if they're attacked in the park, they're not going to become super dog reactive.
Oh yeah, but they're on the flip side. I think
you're gonna make the point I was gonna make.
Okay, so go ahead.
I don't know if you're gonna say this, but on the flip side, you have a dog that's highly resilient. Now it's actually in some ways harder to train them.
Yeah,
because
this is what I was going to say.
With your little cockapoo puppy that you can say no, and they're like, oh, okay. Like,
yeah.
Versus you have a highly resilient dog, and it's like, I don't care.
Yeah,
I don't care that you're telling me no. I'm going to do it anyway. So it's interesting. That's like a hard thing for people to navigate. I've seen conversations about this going on in more positive circles about choosing breeders and stuff. Like if your intention is to train the dog entirely positively, do you want the same dog that might be really successful under a training plan that actually trains like with a lot more aversives? Like maybe you don't even want the same kind of dog.
Yeah. So like I've been asked on several occasions, you know, like advice where, you know, to choose dog sport puppy. And then even we had that conversation, right? You know, the fact that the dog, like the parents were successful with in certain environment or with certain way of training, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful if you like provide the dog like different environment or different type of training. For example, like common belief was that, oh, if you have the parents that they were doing well in the kennels, but you will bring the puppy home, so the puppy will perform better because like arguably this is better environment, where the reality can be like totally opposite. There are dogs that they were bred to live in the kennel, go on the training session and go back to the kennel. You bring them home and they're kind of, you know, like spending energy on something else, and they're not performing that well on the training field. And I had a dog like that, right? In other side, you have the dogs that they need that home environment and in order to kind of build the relationship and working relationship. Like my older dog is like that. You wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't squeeze that dog into the system of, okay, you are spending some time alone, and that was the practice that was like done for so many years. So you kind of leave the dog alone. So then later the dog will give you more at work or on the training sessions. However, you know, my older dog, Pufik, he's like, you have to hang out with him. Like he started to, like, we had like such a breakthrough in our training when he started sleeping in bed. And that was my first line of advice. Like if anybody had like any fucking problem with the dog, like just let him sleep in bed and it's gonna be fine. That solved like, I don't know, 80% of my problems with, you know, like on the training field.
Yeah, that's hilarious. It's interesting though, because I think that also the kind of dogs that probably people want is actually changing. You know, for example, I remember when I was talking to a breeder, I was saying, like when I was getting Onyx, I was talking to a lot of breeders, you know, and I was asking for, hey, look, I don't want a dog where I'm going to be struggling with like dog aggression or like I want a dog that's going to be fairly social. Because in my day job, firstly, I want a dog that's a stooge dog that can actually help me in my regular job. But what they were saying is like, I kind of got the impression like you're not the only one. Like basically, this is like something that people care about way more now than they did in the past. Like now, actually, pretty much maybe not everyone, but a lot of people are coming and they're basically saying the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, like I want a dog that has a lot of drive, but I don't want to deal with the hassle of them like trying to fight every dog they see.
Yeah. So, time has changed, and where before, dog sports or protection dog sports, they were purely or majority selection programs, right? Where right now it's a hobby and so many more people are involved with it, right? Or there are so many people that they want to do kind of bite work, but they just want to do cool stuff with the dog and never compete in anything. So as the, sports is growing, more people are interested, but also those dogs that beforehand belong maybe to the breeders, and they were sitting in the kennels. Right now, they are integral parts of our life. I take my dogs everywhere. That's why it's so important for me. So they are sociable, so they are confident and balanced and this sort of thing. However, 15 years ago, it was something like that, when I was choosing my Malinois puppies from Netherlands, I didn't care about that at all. The breeder told me oh, this one is sociable, this one is unsociable. And I don't care. I want good dog for sport, and I didn't care at all about other areas of life. And then I ended up with extremely aggressive Malinois that honestly, this dog taught me so much, but the life was so stressful. But I thought about that, about this dog this morning when I was thinking about our subject, that thanks to that dog, because it was mainly fear reactivity to other dogs, but he was dangerous dog. He hurt some dogs, right? So when I lived in London, I had to whenever I was going to the public place with him that I couldn't really avoid going over there, then I had to push away great amount of dogs so he's not barbecued them, right? But then, it kind of gave birth to my approach to reactivity, because this dog realized at some point that, hey, daddy keeps me safe, right? And that, I reflected on that he started to improve whenever I was solving his problems. And that gave kind of start my approach to reactivity.
I don't want to go too deep into the reactivity, but
we will not.
you've stumbled into something that was also asked a little bit. Sometimes because we had a little conversation about with the thinking in arousal, we kind of started talking about a lot of this stuff. And then people were saying, look, I understand, I, like you said, I want to keep my dog safe. But I don't understand, some people are saying, I don't even understand how I would do that, because people don't have any control of their dogs, or letting their dogs run all over the place. They kind of feel helpless. And I wondered what your answer to that is.
Oh, there is step-by-step program that you can, honestly, it's step-by-step program where you can build that trust. Of course, at the beginning, you have to make this set up scenarios. You have to kind of artificially build that, but then it's much easier to translate that to everyday life than, because if you are semi-clever with your setup scenarios, only this is a setup, right? The dog shouldn't know that. If you train on the same field every week for 2 years, the dog will soon learn. However, if you are like I said, semi-creative with those setups, or semi-clever, the dog shouldn't never know, right? And then what I noticed is that the handler's confidence goes up. So there is, because there is a difference, real life scenario, for the handler, and setup scenario, because they feel much safer. So the dog will feel that, to some degree. But once the handlers are getting much more confident in those situations and with the solving dog's problem, right, that shouldn't be the case. So anyway,
to me, this is a mindset thing as well, though, because I think I experience that a lot with my reactivity clients, and I think with Lupe, for example, I deliberately didn't socialize him with very many dogs at all. I think he met 2 dogs. He's 8 months old. I think he's met 2 dogs that I like. I think he's actually only met 2 dogs. I think the rest of the time he's been around dogs, but he's not actually met them. So like, I think it's totally possible. I think it's just a mindset thing for most people. It's out of their like comfort realm.
Yeah, but this is the thing. We are talking like so much about socialization, etc., etc. Your dog met 2 dogs, and he's fine.
Yeah.
Because of like also genetics.
But that's not to be confused with like, oh, he's only been around 2 dogs. No, he's been around hundreds and hundreds of dogs. But he's not
mean like socialization in the standard way of understanding.
Yes.
Like he had interactions.
I just want to make that clear for people. Like he's been around loads and loads of dogs. He's just not actually sniffed, like got to that point of like being face to face with only 2 dogs. Yeah. But like, if I can do that, other people can. I'm not like some wizard, you know. It's just you go like I choose places where there aren't a lot of out of control dogs, you know, mostly. And then when I want to get him around dogs for training's sake, I go to classes, I go to group training, you know, more controlled environments. So,
but yeah, going back to our subject.
Like, well, I want to bring it back to pet training, because we went down a little bit of a Schutzhund rabbit hole as well. But a lot of people listening to this aren't into that. So like, in terms of the dog's genetics as well, I think where this is really highlighted in the pet world is in the foreign rescue dogs, where you have generations and generations and generations of dogs that have just been street dogs or stray dogs. And there is a ceiling, and this is something that people don't want to talk about, but there is a ceiling as to how far you can go with a dog that has been generations and generations of avoiding people. And this is where sometimes when you're learning dog training in school and stuff like that, people are talking about counter conditioning, like, hey, you just have to create positive association with the thing the dog doesn't like. It's like, yeah, that's 100% true. But what they don't really talk about is there is a ceiling.
Yeah.
Like, you're only going to be able to get so far. Like, if you have a dog that has like genetics that make them very prone to being nervous of a particular trigger or whatever, like, you can only go so far with counter conditioning. Like, it's not like you can just, you know, feed them treats around the trigger and it's just a matter of reps, and then all of a sudden you're going to go from a dog that's terrified of other dogs to super happy if the genetics aren't there, you know?
No, like you can only operate within genetic makeup, and that's really it. Funny that you brought the rescue thing, right, on the table, because of we bring those dogs from that they were bred to do something different than we want over here, because the social norms, for example, like there was this trend, like, hey, let's bring the dogs from Eastern Europe, right? And over there, the dogs for generations, or they were street dogs, or they were bred to be unfriendly to anything what is not familiar. And like many of the, more than often they were in the villages or countrysides, etc., right? And then we take those dogs and we ship them over to central London, where we have like totally different social norms. You have to be friendly to anything and everything, right? And also like the environment, how dramatically different that is, right? And I really like one of my missions in dog training is to bring attention to noise sensitivity. And I said that like hundreds of times, but looking at studies, like 49% of dogs in the UK are showing noise sensitivities. And those, like, this is the percentage of the dogs that the owner really noticed something. And amount of time that it is unnoticed. So if we will take it into account, like this percentage possibly is so much bigger, because like a lot of time, like people, if the dog is not afraid of the fireworks, he's fine, right? Where the dog may show sensitivity to other noises, it's just not expressed in like very clear behavior response. So we are bringing those dogs that they were designed to live on the countryside, probably in one kind of place, bark at the gate, be unfriendly, and this, like I even mentioned that in my book, that my grandma, she wouldn't want the dog that wouldn't bark, that would be overly friendly. She would like the dogs over there, especially ages ago, like some years ago, they had different purpose, right? So we take those dogs and we bring them to central London, or to the busy places where like it's so easy for them to be overwhelmed. And I've seen the dogs that would pant all the time and they wouldn't just cope with the environment. Right? So like the question is, are we making them a favor?
Yeah, man, this is gonna be this is triggering me. Firstly, you didn't even mention the people, these rescue organizations are bringing over little puppy Anatolian shepherds that are supposed to be in the fields fighting wolves and bears and then placing them in flats in this country.
Okay, so that's the madness. Like, however, I've been through the process of getting a dog from rescue.
Yeah.
And it was so fucking hard that I started to understand why people would bypass that process and then get the dog from the parking lot that was just brought over here. Because they want to do good thing. Yeah. It is just they are not aware that, with the cookies you cannot go there is like you mentioned, there is a ceiling to it. You cannot go beyond genetics, and those genetics can be very, very strong.
Yeah, I feel like this is definitely going to be super, super controversial, but like I think oftentimes we, in this country especially, I don't really pay so much attention to some of the other countries and whatnot, but in this country we focus on the wrong problems. Okay. Right? Like oh man, this is gonna be so controversial, Alex.
Go.
Like
don't be pussy.
I go on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
All I see, all of the dog trainers talking about in this country is electric collars. How many dogs have regardless of your opinion on e-collars, I've been training pet dogs for 15 years. I struggle to think of one dog that's had a super bad experience on an e-collar. And I'm not saying it's whatever. It's your choice about what you want to do with that. But what I see all of the time is foreign dogs that are fucking freaking out in their house. Yeah. And the only way you can get them to cope with life, even just cope with getting by, is through using a lot of medication with them. Yeah. And then I don't understand why that isn't a subject we're talking about, and why we accept, I'm not going to say the rescue's names because I don't want to get sued, but why we accept the massive charities doing this on a big scale, bringing these dogs over from abroad, and all of us as behaviorists go and see this every day, and we don't say shit. It makes me mad. Honestly, it triggers me so much. I don't understand the silence on this subject. And there are the organizations that are doing this, we all act like it's okay, and it just drives me absolutely bonkers. And then we're like, there's an accusation of like over medication, and I totally get it. And that, definitely plays a part. But part of that as well in this country is we're bringing over these dogs that for like, who knows how many generations have survived by avoiding people. This would be the equivalent. Or
by being unfriendly. Right. All the survival mechanism, right?
This would be the equivalent.
This is like whole spectrum of the behaviors that it was providing them survival. Yeah. And they are so strong because like the dogs that wouldn't have that genetic makeup would simply not survive.
This would be the equivalent of me saying, I feel really sorry for the foxes out there. I'm going to go catch them and bring them in my house. And then when they're aggressive...
there are some weirdos doing it. You know that.
Well, there's a lot of weirdos doing it with dogs, and we all shut up about it, And then when that fox is aggressive and is freaking out, we say, this is a behavior problem. We're going to have to stick the fox on a load of fluoxetine and who knows what else, right? Just to cope.
Like on the side note, like did you notice that in last years, like fluoxetine is like prescribed like Skittles? like you will go to any fucking behaviorist and you will ended up like with for the 6 months fluoxetine treatment that I'm dealing with reactivity the most, like that does fuck all for at least from my anecdotal experience, like that didn't change a thing with, I think like I can remember only one dog that, was like basically biting owners in the house, and then with the training and fluoxetine, like kind of got that better. However, this is one dog, and I've seen like so many dogs with that prescription, and because I'm curious, I'm asking owners after like month, 6 months, whatever, like nobody sees the difference.
I don't know that I would say I had the same experience with that. Like, I think for some dogs, medication is really helpful.
I'm not saying anti-medication. I'm just like, I'm not a vet, behavioral vet, so I'm not going to ever advise on medication. However, like my dog was my rescue was on the horse dose of medication. I trained dogs that they were on the medications or they went on medication, and there are like better solutions.
Yeah, I don't want to get too sidetracked. Maybe this is another podcast in itself, medication, but like I've definitely seen positive results using medication. That's why I'm always hesitant to talk about it, because I think both exist. I think there's
definitely
a big problem with overprescription, but I do also think it's helpful for some dogs, and that's why I feel like it's more nuanced. And sometimes I feel like you're supposed to take a position, like you're supposed to go like black or white. Medication's terrible or medication's great, and it's like there's an in between,
But this is the thing. This is why people are arguing, because they want like black and white. This is good, this is bad. Like that's why equal conversation is so appealing to people, because you can be pro or against, and it's very tricky conversation, because like if you are pro or not against, you are put into one bag with whole weird spectrum of trainers that they will use e-collars. And right now, like one video comes to my mind. I'm not going to name the channel or the guy, because I think a lot of that is done for the exposure and just to trigger people that they will fucking comment and give their own opinion. So it was really hard to watch.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so let's say I don't want to give too many like details, so because I don't want to bring too much attention to that.
Dude,
right?
You know how we grow this podcast, right?
But
you know how to grow the podcast, right?
Yeah,
you have to be coming out.
You gotta have beef with people. No, like the dog was afraid of something, and the guy was like, "I'm gonna use e-collar to deal with that." And like my dad told me when I had toothache that get the hammer and hit your own foot. You will soon forget about your toothache. One of the ways of dealing with. But why don't we go to the dentist? The fact that something is effective doesn't necessarily mean like this is the only way, or but yeah, like with the medication, the same thing, right? Of course, there are dogs that is beneficial. Like for my dog, like it was beneficial for like just to get the dog from rescue and implement the dog in my environment, right? However, like something what I observe is this phenomenon that you have anxious dog, fluoxetine. You have aggressive dog, fluoxetine. Like any sort of problem, like it seems like one fit all solution, at least from my anecdotal experience.
Here's the thing though, I think both of those, even though they're on both extremes of the spectrum, it's the same problem, which is like if you only have a hammer, everything is a nail.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're one of the behaviorists that is just, super into drugs, that is your hammer. And if you're one of the trainers that's super into e-collars, that's your hammer.
Yeah.
Right?
However, like though, but not everybody are like that, right? This is why, but I understand it's so appealing to people to have rock solid answers, so they don't have to spend any brain calories on solving the problem. Because what I have seen especially in Finland, along the trainers that I trained with, the standard answer, if you ask the question, like, let's say from the dog sport, how to fix the grip, how to do that, what to do when the dog is whatever, like whining, and then people are looking for the answer. And from the best trainers that I hang out with, the answer was very unsexy, because they were saying, depends on the dog. And people hate that. That's why they are not so famous, even though the skill set is so impressive. And because like nobody wants to hear the answer, like depends of the dog. Right? Like people like systems. That's why for marketing purposes, like I'm using the word system. Right?
I want to jump back a little bit because I realized I didn't finish the thought on the foreign dog thing. And I think some people are going to, like, I know what people are going to think. Firstly, does Nick just not like foreign dogs? It's not true.
But also, like there are dogs that were brought from there and
cope
they're
well.
fucking
I know, that's my
perfectly
second point.
fine.
My second point.
All right.
So firstly, I don't have an issue with foreign dogs at all. I don't have a
What
problem
about
with
foreign
dogs.
people?
Everyone except Polish people. I can't stand Polish people. And then secondly, exactly as you said, of course there are dogs that have come over and they've just coped fine. The trouble is the rescues do not have a track record at all of being able to discern those dogs. Right? Because clearly we're seeing far too many that are stressed out. And there was a study about that as well. I can't remember all of I'm not going to remember the percentages off the top of my head, but there's a massive increase in percentage of behavior problems with foreign rescue dogs versus UK rescue dogs. And I think that
I can imagine it
genetic.
just all makes sense.
Yeah.
Like why don't you get the Scooby from Battersea that is already here, copes well, you probably will know like more of the history rather than, it's just like much more romantic.
But
I brought the dog from, I don't know, Cyprus, Romania,
Right.
whatever, and then people can fucking
part of the
pat themselves on the heads.
There's kind of another problem though, which you were kind of alluded to, which is like how difficult it is to rescue a dog, right?
It's
We
not
need
easy.
to do a whole episode on rescue because this is
We
gonna,
will, because like I'm telling you something, like Emma that works with me, works in temperament dogs. Like she said, like you got this dog because of your ego, because they didn't want to give you that dog. So I was fighting for it, and even though like the dog had like ton of behavioral issues, like definitely I would like to record the episode over that, since like I've got this dog. Finally, after so many months of like trying to get it out, and yeah, like definitely we're gonna chat about it. But speaking of the genetics and temperament, something what fascinates me in my younger dog is her genetic design and her temperament. Because like at the beginning, I told you that before, probably I told that on this podcast, I was terrified when I was taking this dog because of it's not like this dog was like out of this planet. However, like my standards of living with the dog are not the same like in other households, right? My dog goes for holidays, travels with me, has to be good in the hotel. Like my older dog is running off lead in the town center, playing in the fountain with children, right? Like this is the standard that I have, and I don't want to compromise that. So the dog that wouldn't be suitable for it, or I wouldn't be able to train this dog like to be like that, this is a problem. And with the training, however confident trainer you are, you can't guarantee, especially if you have like severe, like dealing with the severe fear, what I was dealing with. But anyway, what is very interesting about this dog, like she has some very intensive fears. That's why she was like on a horse dose of medication, and she wouldn't cope at all with the environment that she was around with, right? As far I'm concerned, like for the 12 months of life, and those 12 months was in the rescue, over 12 months, the dog never crossed the road because she was like so terrified of the traffic and cars. But in the same time, like gunshots, nothing. Fireworks, nothing. Like she will recover from the stress like quickly. You will tell her no, and she's like, "Fuck you."
yeah.
So like interesting. And I don't know what happened to that dog. Like having in mind she was in the rescue since 8 weeks old. Like I don't know if there was any trauma experience, but like related with the traffic. But anyway, the dog has definitely resilience. The dog, it's not in so many areas of life. That's why she was so interesting dog to train.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to look up Emily's question so we can do the second part of this. So Emily adds to the first question. She says, how does environment affect a dog's temperament? If you got some thoughts on that.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, that the temperament is a very tricky thing, like anything behavior-wise, because obviously by the definition, like temperament is innate, right? Like hugely, what's the word?
Genetic?
Hugely genetic, right? However, we assess temperament by the behavior, so something that we can observe. So, and the behavior is a mixture of the environment and, of course, genetic design. So, like looking at those, it's influenced by both. I think we have like genetic predisposition to react to the things, or we have genetic predisposition how we recover from stress, etc., etc. However, the environment has like also is playing a role.
I guess maybe we should talk about like what can you do to manipulate the environment in order to have positive change in the temperament.
So, like this is the thing that you gotta assess that temperament before the dog will get a lot of experiences. Then you can see what is the genetic design of the dog. That's why we assess that like in the puppies, right? Before they will experience whole world. And based on that, right, you will know what you are dealing with and you can adjust accordingly. If you have the dog that is not recovering well, practice that, right? Work on the confidence. And so the dog can, recover from stresses, right? There are, of course, ways to do so, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, also like if you're talking about like rescue dogs and stuff like that, even when we were talking about like, I don't know what you call it, board and trains, residential training, whatever you call it. I remember when we did that episode, you were talking about having the dog for a period of time in the house without really doing a lot with them, just where they can kind of de-stress. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, even that's like a way of, manipulating, because the environment totally changes, of course, when they come in to you, and same thing if you have those, those foreign rescue dogs, like, or any dog that's really, really stressed. Obviously, in order to start, you need to change the environment in a way that's a bit more productive. Like for example, like if you have a dog that's really, really scared of traffic, maybe in the beginning, you don't want to be right on the main road.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like you kind of want to build things gradually, etc.
So definitely the dog has to be able to recover. And this is the vicious circle. So we have that dog in that environment and the dog is not coping well and cannot recover. This is why I'm just bringing that noise sensitivity, because especially if the dog is sensitive to domestic noises, like can't literally recover from stress, and that recovery is extremely, extremely important. So if you are a dog trainer, I'm sure you have seen analogy of the bucket or sink or whatever, right? So, like the inflow is just like emotional challenge the dog gets, right? The recovery is like from the sink, the drain, right? But if the dog cannot recover from stress, will be much more prone to overflow, aka react to
trigger stacking, whatever you want to call it.
Stacking. Yeah. And then like you mentioned like you are being like triggered by the rescues. Like I'm triggered by one thing. Everybody talks about fucking trigger stacking. Every trainer, right? Yeah. We like nobody like trigger stacking and so on and so on and so on, right? And we have the fear reactive dogs, and I downloaded like in last months like ton of PDFs, blueprint for reactivity, like from different trainers. I'm not really shitting on anyone. None of them mention noise sensitivity. Like we talk about trigger stacking, nobody, not even mention about noise sensitivity, where from my personal experience, 100% fear reactive dogs to other dogs were also noise sensitive, or they showed some noise sensitivity. That's why, like in residential setting, like I was trying to for at least a week to give the dog like very calm, boring life. So there was exercise in the woods, quiet time in the house, a lot of sleep, a lot of chewing, rest, and this sort of thing, because this is how the dog will recover from stress. But I want to bring that attention to the noises, that if you are aware of the trigger sucking, like be aware of the noises, because like this is the big part of how the dog may not be able to recover. And that can be, I don't know, bin truck or whatever. That is just draining your dog from any resilience. And I just, like, that was my question for all of the years. Why, like, only workshops on noise sensitivity wouldn't sell unless in firework period, right? I think we just simply cannot relate to it. Like, we cannot, like, we don't feel like it can be actual fear, where, you know, because we do wonderful things for our dogs. Like, if, you know, how many dogs right now has coats whenever there is like less than 15 degrees outside? Loads, long-haired dogs, right? Yeah. Coats. We feed or overfeed our dogs because we don't like to be hungry. Like the same, like we don't like to be cold. We take dogs to the groomers. They don't give a shit, but we like want pretty dogs, or we like to look certain way. And in the same time, we don't give a shit about noises, right? Like in human world, we don't experience noise sensitivity that often. Apparently, like children under 7 are prone to it, but later on diminishing with the time and exposure. Where in dogs, it's getting worse. So if your puppy has like any sort of sensitivity to noises, I think only 4% of the dogs get better. Like majority of them get worse, right? And potentially they can develop, you know, like some fear noises, behavior problems. And there is like those noises are going throughout so many other behavior problems, like separation anxiety. Apparently 80-something% is also related with noises, right? So yeah, like my mission is just to, even though it is unsexy training, even though it is something that we cannot relate to, like we should, like, if you have like any sort of confidence issue, work with noises, like as a first thing, and you can do it at home, and you can get very creative at that.
Oh,
right?
Dude, I feel like you need to share some, maybe, I don't know if you want to make a webinar or something, but I feel like you need to share some ideas about how you work with it, because I think it's quite a notoriously difficult problem to make progress on.
Yeah, depends on the environment. We're going back to that. However, you can change your dog's relationship with noises in general, and then maybe address those that are problematic. And the ways, like there is ton of ways of doing it, right? So, but yeah, webinar might be good.
Yeah, definitely.
Nobody will buy it. This is the thing. Like,
I think maybe after
the webinar,
maybe after hearing
around
this,
noises, and then like
Yeah, but when you explain it, like how it has an effect on everything else, I always think the same thing with separation anxiety. You know, it's like if someone is coming to me for dog reactivity or any kind of aggression issue, but then they're leaving the dog for big periods of the day, and the dog is freaking out because they have separation anxiety. It's like, I mean, do you know what I mean? It's like you're starting from such a bad foundation.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, like we're gonna do episode on reactivity as well. But
episode on reactivity, episode on noise sensitivity, episode on rescue.
Nobody will listen to the noise sensitivity. I'm gonna bet like nobody will listen to that.
Ah, it's okay.
We're gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, the regulars will be interested.
But yeah, where we were going with it?
Man, I'm lost. I think we've kind of wrapped up.
Temperament and environment. So yeah, like I think maybe to put it this way, like the younger the dog is, then the proportion leans more into genetics. The older the dog is, the proportion may lean into more environment and experiences.
It's one of the questions I ask a lot when I do sessions with people. actually, I think probably every session I do, I usually tend to ask, like, when did this begin?
Oh yeah.
You know, and that can be quite informative. You know, if you have a dog that's been showing aggressive behavior since they were very young, then, you know, that makes you, you know, I'm not saying it's definitive, but it just maybe adds a little bit more weight into thinking, okay, maybe this is a little bit more genetic, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm always asking two questions at least. But like, when did that start, and is it getting worse? And the funny thing with the last dog, Ollie, that I trained, like, I asked the same question because we were talking over the phone before I seen the dog. And usually people will say like, oh yes, it's getting worse, that's why I'm looking for help. But with him, it was like, no, it's not getting worse, it's on the same level. And I'm like, okay. But then I've seen the dog and it couldn't get worse. Like, that was you've seen the video. How worse it, how
Yeah, that's quite an aware thing to say, though.
It couldn't get any worse, or like significantly worse. Like, if the dog is reacting to the other dog at the distance of 150 meters or God knows how far, and has like total meltdown when the dog is close by, how much worse it can get.
It's really difficult when you ask these questions as well, because you're dealing with the people's perception of the issue. You know, like, for example, sometimes someone will put an inquiry in and they'll be like, my dog is super aggressive, like, you know, this is really, really bad. And then I'll turn up and it's like, oh, this is easy. Like,
yeah,
this is
but also, you know, like, if you are doing that, you know, first consultation with the client, right? Yeah. You kind of, you want to see if the person is aware what is happening. Right. So, for example, you know, is it getting worse? Like, some people, they don't think about that and they will reflect that. Oh, yeah, it is getting worse. So if I want to train that, if I want to do anything about that, then I might be even in bigger trouble. So there is some urgency to actually take actions. Right. So some of the questions are purely to, like, for the person, for the customer, or for the dog owner to kind of realize where they are with the dog.
Also, their perception matters. Like, you know, even though for me, when I see that dog and it's like, this is an easy dog. Like, if to them it's a giant problem, then it's a giant problem to them. It's kind of like the same thing with dogs, right? Like,
the worst thing that happened to you is the worst thing that happened to you, right? It's the worst thing ever that happened to you. That can be broken nail, that can be whatever, barking dog, where if you experience, like, if you have another person that experienced something different, right? Then, you know, they have like different definition of the worst thing that happened to me. Right?
Yeah. It's always a pleasant surprise when, you know, someone has put in that inquiry where they've really, like, you know, this is terrible. And then you go see the dog and you're like, we're going to get this solved pretty quick.
And we have like other spectrum that I even notice, you know, I don't want to, yeah, I'm like, fuck it. I'm rescue dog owner. I can shit on, like, because it's my tribe right now.
Okay.
There are like so many.
Oh, I think I know where you're going.
Are looking for excuses, right? I've seen some dogs that they were barking head off, like, at other dogs, and it's just like, oh, he's rescue. He had a hard life, and, you know, like, just totally accepting dramatically unsocial behavior because of, oh, it's a rescue. He had a hard life, right? So I'm a rescue dog owner, so fuck it. Like,
yeah, I mean, people are looking for excuses. I think that's also why oftentimes people have bad experiences with other dog owners out on walks, you know, because someone's dog will be running up, causing chaos, you know.
And he's not gonna bite. Like, this is what I hear. He's not gonna bite.
Yeah. And then they make it your...
What the fuck? Like, so then since when the biting is the line on the sand?
Yeah. But then they make it your problem, as if you're the one with the out of control dog. If you're walking a reactive dog, why are you walking a dog that's aggressive in public? What, blah, 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 you know? Or why do you pick the dog up? Like, you're making him react. And it's like, no, it's your problem. Like, you're the one that can't control your dog. I don't care what I do with my dog. Is if you can't call your dog back, it's your problem.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't read or comment on Facebook. I did that like very few times, especially in my adult life. But there was there was a post on local group about like there was some argument like the lady, she had reactive dog, and then some dogs off the lead, and then the guy, the lady with the reactive dogs like, oh, why don't you control the dog? And then the other like, why do you take this dog to public places if it's like unsocial, right? And then I remember like then I stepped in, and since then, whenever I will go to that place, because it's like the group dedicated to one place, everybody are putting their dogs on the lead.
Oh, really?
I don't know how, like, everybody. Like, it's just, the change happened, like, that day. Like,
oh, man, you need to, like, save that as a template. Like, I want that, I want that comment. But, like...
But, like, you need to take the dogs in order to, bring them to life, to society, to rehabilitate them, right? You have to do it. And just ignorance that are just making it fucking harder. So I can't say that in UK podcast. Don't do
that. There's such a thing as dog park culture, though. I really noticed this in in Bristol, obviously a different city, but I'm sure this happens everywhere. There are parks that, like, I feel like different parks have different cultures. It's really interesting. Like, there's one park that I think of where it seems completely the norm. Everyone goes to the middle of the park, they get their coffees, and their dog is just, they don't even know where their dog is. It's just like all over the place.
Right.
And everyone just seems to think that's okay. But you go to some other parks and it's like a much better culture, right? And I just really feel like there's different cultures in different parks. And I think that's an interesting, like, phenomena. And I can't explain it, but it's something that I feel like I've experienced.
I never thought about that. Like, I'm so unsocial. I will just go to the park whenever I have to train the dog. Like, you're not gonna see me there with my dog. It's just not the vibe that I like.
I kind of agree, but this comes back to, like, the whole how do you stop dogs from running up to your dog thing. Part of it is choosing where you walk.
Choosing where you walk. But also, like, even if I will take the dog to the public place and, like, as much as I can, even in the middle of the woods, I will meet off-lead dogs, right? And I will meet people that they want to chit-chat. And they don't ever stop and think that maybe, just maybe, I'm in the middle of the fucking wood for a reason. Like, maybe, right? But I don't think it's that difficult. Maybe I'm saying it because I had this dangerous dog that he would barbecue any dog that would make physical contact with him. So there was like some serious urgency to, protect those other dogs from him. But it looked like for him, it was like I'm protecting him from the other dogs.
What are you doing in that situation? You're in the woods, someone's coming towards you, their little labradoodles running towards you.
There are like very simple, like simple yet very effective ways. First of all,
legal.
I need to. Yeah, I crossed the line one time, mate. I almost had a fight with the guy. I had to put my dog in the car because, like, that was protection dog, so I didn't want to get him involved. And I had the guy that really was like trying to provoke me to go for the fist fight.
Okay.
Yeah, he didn't like this. Anyway, so since then I changed the strategy. So first of all, you need to have the dog under control. And this is why I'm teaching something what I call color communication. So my dog will respond. So I can communicate with my dog with touch or tactile cues. So, I call it color communication for a certain reason. It's not because I'm not teaching it like normally we are teaching lead pressure training. But if your dog understands lead pressure training, that's going to do the job. Like I just do that like a little bit different. I want that to become a cue to the dog. And because that will also help me to control my dog, and I know where my dog is without looking at the dog. And this is very, very important because if you have reactive dogs, of course, lead will get you in trouble. Restrain on the lead or will take avoidance option from the menu, so the dog will more likely go into the fight behavior. As avoidance option is of the menu. If held on the lead. But with the frustration dogs as well, like restraint will create more frustration and therefore like much more intensive reactive response. So for all those reasons, I'm teaching the dog to communicate with the lead, right? So I can communicate with the word and I can communicate with my dog without making my dog or more frustrated or more uncomfortable. Okay? When this is done, right, the whole spectrum of options like is open for you. Because I can navigate my dog, I can block this other dog. I can, like, usually what I do, I have like some extra food for those dogs that are approaching me. And then I will offer them like some food, like 90% of the dogs is like, oh shit, sausage, right? And then I will sit them and I will drop the treat, like they will move away and I will go my own way, right? Yeah, vast majority of the dogs, they will be, oh, there is a food. And then I can control, like I have like 2 dogs under control. Of course, my reactive dog has to be, trained to the point that trusts me and that I will handle the situation, right? It's just, I'm talking about using that trust like in that context, right? So always extra food for this other dog. Blocking other dogs that they don't want to get food, it's also very effective. It's not that difficult, really, as long as you have your own dog, like following whatever you ask the dog to follow. Spare lead, also very good. You can put that dog on the lead and ask the owner to collect the dog. It's really, even with my, let's say my older dog Fufik, he's friendly and but I live by the rule that no strange dog will greet my dog, especially if it's a puppy. But in general, I don't let my dog to play with strange dogs or greet with the strange dogs because I don't know them. Like that just can be bad match for him. I really never had a situation where I wouldn't be able to control. Maybe when 4 dogs approached me and they were like very unfriendly. So that was a little bit like, whoa. But still ended up good.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. I think people will.
And then with people that I train, with my clients that we are training reactivity, we are training their reactive dogs. We are going through the drills. Like literally I'm sending my dog to them and they learn to handle like this visitor.
Oh, so that's really interesting.
So they can work on the mechanics. They will predict, oh, if I'm looking over here, usually the dog goes over there. And then, once you will get that idea, then you're fine. However, after saying it, in busy park, I don't have to use it that often rather than in less busy places, right? If you have like, let's say, 55 dogs in the park, right? They are like they're not being excited about,
their attention is divided. Yeah.
So, like parks in London recently, like they seem, to be different if it goes for enthusiasm from other dogs when they were seeing me with the dog. Like it was just, oh, you're like another dog, another guy. So arguably those environments might be even easier.
That's another thing. We can cover this another day, but like this, I remember seeing you do that with the stew setups, where I think a lot of times, a lot of dog trainers is very calm. Like, so people walking past each other with dogs and stuff like that. And I think you're one of the first people I saw that was like deliberately creating challenging situations.
Oh, yeah.
Like for example, like whether you throw the ball for your dog or you throw food or whatever, you're making them run around in a more realistic way.
Yeah, we were talking about this thinking in arousal, and something what I'm like really obsessed about. And this is something what we want to teach our dogs first before you will make the calmer. Like making the dog calmer takes a lot of time.
I mean the stooge dog though.
But with the stooge dog, like this is how we are getting it. So in kind of controlled scenario, we can bring that arousal and difficulty of the scenarios like to way another level. I call it like exaggeration phase, where I want to practice the way so reality will be boring, and for the dog and for the handler. And once we get that, happy living.
Yeah, I think we should wrap it up.
All right, let's go train dogs. Right?
Okay. Super.
Cool. Bye.